Okay, welcome to Wednesday Night Slides number 48. Got a couple of things on tap tonight, some trolleys and some steam. That's the big things tonight. So I'm going to jump right into it if I can find the right screen, which is always a challenge. And there we go. That, and that, and then go back to Zoom and share the screen. Ooh, there we go. All right, y'all should be seeing the title slide.
Yes, sir.
All righty, here we go then. As usual, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to jump in. Easiest way to unmute yourself for a comment or question is just to hit the space bar on your computer, say what you want to say, and then release the space bar. I don't mind the interaction. Here we go with Wednesday Night Slides number 48. And we're going to start off with New Year's Eve. I rode a trolley trip sponsored by the Friends of Philadelphia Trolleys over SEPTA's Red Arrow division, specifically the Media and Sharon Hill lines, which run out of Upper Darby. These lines don't actually come into the city of Philadelphia, though, physically themselves. It was a rainy New Year's. Here we see our car at the shop at Upper Darby, ready to go. One of the Kawasaki cars. Our first photo stop was at Leamy Avenue. And it was here that we met a car coming up from Media. This is the regular service car coming up. And here's the regular service car going past our chartered car. We got into Media, we did a group photo there. That's our gang for New Year's Eve. The trip began at 9 o'clock and we were still on the trolley at midnight, and we got back in at around 1:30. The guy on the left is Ted Mills. He's a supervisor on the Red Arrow division, and he's a rail fan, and he makes running trips out there really, really easy. The guy on the right was our operator. He's a union operator. I forget his name now, unfortunately. But whenever we do charters, of course, we have to have the union operator on board. But Ted loves to run. And so Ted always throws the scheduled guy out of the seat, and he spends the night running the trolleys because he likes to run a little the fast side. And when it's a charter, you don't need to worry about stopping at stations. All you got to do is get to the next photo stop. So he can wind them up and let them roll. Most of it's private right of way, and let them roll without having to worry about looking out for anybody at the next platform. Here we are in downtown Media. This is one of the two places where these cars are actually in the street. It's single track through downtown Media, right down the middle of State Street. And we stopped at the Media Theater for a shot in front of the marquee there. And then this is the station behind the Springfield Mall in Springfield, PA. And this is a number of small station shelters along both lines, both the Media and the Sharon Hill. This is inside one of the shelters looking out. Still raining. Got back to Upper Darby for a quick restroom break, since there's no restrooms on the streetcars. That's a regular service car on the left, ready to go out to Sharon Hill. Our car is in the background there on the right-hand side. We always have fun with the destination signs. Here we see our trolley in Upper Darby, Pennsylvania, ready to head out on the E line to the Embarcadero and the Caltrain station. Back out on the road, now heading for Sharon Hill. This is a brand new siding they just put in. It goes to single track beyond here, from down into Sharon Hill itself, single track private right of way. Ted had not run a car on the new siding yet, so he made sure he ran the car right up to the bumper block so he'd have all the mileage. This is midnight. We're on the Sharon Hill line still. Behind that car, just beyond the shelter, in the right center of the frame, that light coming up from behind that car, that's actually fireworks being set off by the locals at midnight. And then right after midnight, the fog rolled in. And it got thicker and thicker and made some really, really, really cool shots. I needed somebody to pose in the shot here to provide a silhouette. So we recruited one of the guys who wasn't taking pictures to stand here and look up into our streetcar. Then here's our group reboarding the trolley after the photo stop. At Drexel Hill Junction, that's where the lines split. They're on the same line out of 69th Street in Upper Darby. They get to Drexel Hill Junction, the lines split. One goes to Media, one goes to Sharon Hill. It's coming back in at Drexel Hill Junction. And here comes a car outbound out of Upper Darby. And that's the regular service car on the left and our chartered car on the right. As we're ready to head back in, I'm going to call it a night for that trip. So that's the trolley part of the trip. Now we're going to go back to October 2003. There were a ton of steam charters right in a row all over the country. And I was fortunate enough to be able to attend quite a good chunk of them. And it started out by heading out to Durango, Colorado on the Durango and Silverton narrow gauge, where they had one of their 282s, the 473, decked out in the old 1950s Bumblebee scheme. The reason for the name is fairly obvious. And we did photo run-bys with it on the High Line. They put a big box headlight on it to give it the official Bumblebee appearance, which it was used for a movie. So it was a little bit on the gaudy side. That's why it was painted Bumblebee back in the 50s. But usually these engines were basic black. I really wanted to see the Bumblebee scheme. We had to go into the siding, wait for a work train to go by. And then there were two trains bound for Silverton, regular service trains we had to hold for. Here comes the first one. And here comes the second one. Once they were clear, we headed out onto the High Line. This is from the train looking forward. And we did a photo stop on the Animas River Bridge at the north end of the High Line. We went up as far as Cascade Y, where we turned the train, then we backed a little further north from there for more photo run-bys. Here's our locomotive heading into the Y at Cascade. For some reason, I don't know why they did this. For some reason, though, during the stop at Cascade, they painted the headlight black. The trip operator swore up and down that the locomotive, while it was painted in the Bumblebee scheme, had both a yellow headlight and a black headlight at various times. I have yet to find a photo of the Bumblebee scheme in the 50s with a box headlight where the headlight was painted black. So I'm not 100% sure this was actually authentic. I wasn't entirely entirely on board with this idea. But anyhow, here's our train now heading back south towards Durango with the black headlight.
They could have at least used grimy black instead of shiny black.
Yeah, it wasn't. It actually looks worse in the photos here. Well, more. It stands out more in the photos than it actually did in real life that day. But yeah, should have taken some soot and shoveled it onto the headlight and give it a little bit of dust on it. And back to the Animas River Bridge. I look at this shot and I think, dang, I really wish that was a yellow headlight still. Oh well. Then we got back into Durango and I drove north to catch a regular service train coming back into town, heading back in from Silverton. Next stop was still in the west, out of Chama, New Mexico, the Cubres and Toltec Scenic Railroad. Like the Durango and Silverton, it's a former Rio Grande narrow gauge line. And they ran a charter with the 487 with Rio Grande lettering on the tender instead of the Cubres and Toltec lettering on the tender. So we headed out of Chama, and you go into Colorado fairly quickly, and then you wind up meandering back and forth across the border. There are still several water tanks along the line. I hadn't been out there before on this line when the trees were changing color. The aspen were going to gold. It really added to the photos. Climbing the hill up to Cubres Pass, which is over 10,000 feet in elevation. And then we stopped at Cascade Trestle. And this was a little bit unusual because I've been on charters here before and since. And at Cascade, the wind is almost always blowing right into your face for this angle. And usually the smoke outruns the train. So you can't produce smoke while crossing the bridge, otherwise it just ruins the photos. But on this particular day here, we had a nice still day, so we were able to actually get smoke out of the locomotive without it fouling up the photos. This is Phantom Curve. Interesting rock formations. There was we did a couple of run-bys here. This is one angle. This is coming through the cut at Phantom Curve. And then this shot here shows the rock formations better from the other side of the track. I'm not going to guarantee all these shots are really in order. I think they're kind of more or less in order. There was some talk about once we got to our turnaround point, which I think was sublet or Bighorn Y probably, of rearranging the train and putting some of the box cars up front. But then they thought about it and said, no, those two tank cars right behind the engine, they're pretty heavy. We're not sure we want them banging around behind the box cars. So we ran with this consist the entire day. Coming out of one of the two tunnels in the line. This is actually taken from a rock ledge that drops off on both sides. It's about 3 or 4 feet wide. It goes way out. You can really get a broadside shot here coming out of the tunnel. As I said, it's only about 4 feet wide and it drops off several hundred feet on both sides, front and back. So this is about as far as I could crawl out onto it. Some people just went all the way out in the end without thinking twice about it, but not me. And back to Cascade again. As you can see, we lost our son later in the day. Got back from Colorado, and my next stop was West Virginia. Now, this is not a steam engine, obviously, but there was a quick photo charter on the West Virginia Central using their Western Maryland diesels. This F unit, and they also have an FA. And we did a quick photo charter with those, with all Western Maryland consist for power, which looks pretty cool, actually. There's the FA. I think that's a speed limit sign, or it might be a mile marker. I think it's a speed limit sign for the tunnel. The real reason for being in West Virginia was for the Scenic Railroad, a photo charter there with the log cars. We used Shea number 11. That's on the right-hand side there. But Climax number 6 had just come out of the shop. And it wasn't ready for the cast main line yet, but we could use it in the yard for a few photo run-bys. And there's the Climax. For those not familiar with Climax locomotives, their cylinders are actually mounted in a V on either side of the cab. You can see one of the cylinders right in front of the striping underneath the cab window there. There's one on the other side too. Those cylinders are opposed cylinders, and they drive a drive shaft that runs underneath the entire locomotive from the front wheels to the back wheels. And then that drive shaft drives all 12 of the wheels, 6 axles, designed for low speeds, but a lot of power. Then I was up on the mountain with Shea 11. This is at Whitaker, about a third of the way up the mountain. This was a logging camp at one time. This is all the Maurer Lumber Company back in the day. And now it's a West Virginia State Park. Here's our Shea locomotive. Once again, it's not like a standard steam engine. It's designed for low speeds, but heavy hauling. It has its cylinders mounted vertically in front of the cab there, and they drive a drive shaft on one side of the locomotive. You can see the drive shaft that runs the length of the locomotive that then turns the wheels. About 2/3 of the way up, there's a Y. They can turn the trains there. Here's the number 11 on the Y. And then from there, it was back to Pennsylvania to the Strasburg Railroad for a photo charter. Here's Canadian National number 89. It started off with a night photo session at the Strasburg station the night before the charter. And the next day, we were out at sunrise to get 89 on a mixed train, mixed freight and passenger. Actually, it's all freight here. Got the caboose. That's right. This was all freight. We got around using Strasburg's motor car between the run-bys on this trip. I've said it before. If I was going to start my own tourist railroad and I wanted to do both passenger service and some freight charters, I would pick one of these Canadian National 260s. They are so sweetly proportioned. They look good on short freight. They look good on passenger trains. They're just a nice looking locomotive. Plenty of run-bys for the 89. The local Amish farmer brought out his team of horses for photos, and the horses do really well with a steam engine. I was wondering how they would react having to be a little close to the tracks for the photos with this big steam engine going past, and the horses don't seem to mind very much at all. And there's Snowball the dog down there by the rear wheel of the tractor. Snowball is a border collie, at least has border collie blood in him. And at one of the photo stops, one of our group had wandered off to the side to shoot broadside video, and Snowball noticed that he had wandered away and spent the entire run by barking at him, trying to get him to go back with the rest of the herd. And the Strasburg countryside provides a really nice backdrop for charters like these. We had a meet with the regular train. Number 90 was powering the tourist train that day. Here's a shot I always wanted to do, but you can't really do this on your own. But with somebody from the railroad right there, I got permission to actually stand between the rails in front of our charter train, which was sitting still, and get the shot of 90 rolling past on the right-hand side. Not something I would do if I was by myself, but with somebody from the railroad right there to say, yeah, you can do it, then it was fine. And this is obviously boy, we turn I guess we turn the engine halfway through the day. Here's the engine pointing in the other direction, with 90 going by with a regular train. We've lost our light, however. From there, we headed out to East Broad Top, out near, it's located in Rock Hill Furnace, Pennsylvania, kind of west of Harrisburg, narrow gauge line. And we had a photo charter there with a coal train. Gloomy morning, going through the shops at Rock Hill Furnace. And like I said, it was kind of gloomy, so we took advantage of whatever brightness we could find, like this bright red bush, add some color to the scene. Here we are at McMullen Summit. This is pretty much a typical train that East Broad Top would have run in the 1950s. They would have run a box car for less than carload freight. That would have been your UPS trucks of the day. That would be for small deliveries to communities along the line. Then a string of hopper cars. Although back in the coal hauling days, there have been many, many more hopper cars, probably around 30 on a train. And then a caboose bringing up the rear. Apparently, we finally got rid of the clouds, but we also managed to derail the train. Hit a spot where the coal hoppers spread the rails and went on the ground, which kind of gummed things up. They got things re-railed, and we headed back into Rock Hill Furnace. Unfortunately, the derailment happened at a point that was going to cut off most of the good afternoon photo run-bys. We couldn't get there because the track needed to be repaired. It would take days to repair the track. So with most of the afternoon shots cut off, we opted pretty much to cut the charter short because we all had to be somewhere else the next day. So a few more final shots on the EVT, and it was in the car to head for Ohio. The next charter was on the Ohio Central Railroad out of Sugar Creek, Ohio, using Grand Trunk Western 484 6325. And they put on quite a show with this big engine. One of the employees, his front yard has the Ohio Central going right through it, and he's cleared out all the brush and everything else. And this is in his front yard. We did several run-bys here. This would be so not all these are going to be in precise order. This would be the next morning at Morgan Run, where the railroad shop is. For some reason, they have fog there almost every morning. It's very predictable. So we did a lot of run-bys in the morning fog there, using both the 6325 and Canadian Pacific 1293 on a passenger train. Here we have two trains out on the line, one on a freight, one on a passenger train. With side-by-side run-bys, fun things like that. Once again, a shot I wouldn't do without somebody from the railroad being right there. The 6325 on the left, despite all the smoke, is actually sitting still, while the 1293 comes blasting by on the right. And then the 1293 is put onto the freight train. We had to go into the siding here to let this coal train go by. This is actually a captive service coal train. Ohio Central has both the coal mine and the power plant on its railroad. So these coal cars never need to leave the Ohio Central. But the power plant needs the coal when it needs it. So we had to pause our run-bys and let the coal train go by. That's the power on the back of the coal train going past our photo freight. Then we double-headed the two locomotives together. And then 6325 got its turn on the passenger train. Back to the double header again. And this is actually out of sequence. Like I said, not all these slides are going to be in the right order. This was the previous day at that employee's front yard again, looking the going away shot there. And this is back on the first morning, actually. Here's that guy's front yard. That's the view he has of his house. His driveway would actually be just ahead of the locomotive at this point. And then at some point we did a night photo session. I can't remember if it was between the 2 days we were there or at the end of the second day or when that actually was. But here we have both locomotives at the shop at Morgan Run after dark. The final steam event of that October back in 2003 involved Steamtown National Historic Site up in Scranton. They were running a trip to the Delaware Water Gap out of Scranton using Canadian Pacific number 2317. Here we see it going through the big curve at Cresco in the Pocono Mountains and coming into East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. Then they stopped at East Stroudsburg, let everybody off. They took water into the tender. The East Stroudsburg station is in the background there on the left. That has since burned down, and they built a replica station, but not in that spot. The new replica station is actually on the other side of the tracks. It would be behind the locomotive in this photo here. You'll be able to see it from this angle. Out of East Stroudsburg, here it is going through the town of Delaware Water Gap. Then from here, I figured I wouldn't be able to get ahead of it again until it got down to its runaround point at Slateford Junction on the far end of the actual water gap. So I was driving through the water gap, and I was a little bit surprised to find the train stopped right here in the middle of the water gap. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Well, quite a commotion around the cab. Everybody's talking, and you can see just beyond the guy with the blue hat underneath the hose there. That's the first wheel of the tender. It's not on the rails. And here's the tender and the first coach on the ground. This is a little bit scary. This is on the road side of the train. I was allowed to go around to the river side of the train to take a look at things. And the rail had actually rolled onto its side. The shiny part you're seeing there facing out is actually the rail head, the top of the rail. The locomotive itself stayed on the track. But the tender and the first few cars hit that rolled rail and derailed. And like I said, it's the river's right there, just off to my left at this shot here. It's fortunate the locomotive stayed on the rails. I'm not sure what would have happened had the rail rolled under the engine as well. Kind of scary. But anyhow, it took them hours to rescue everybody off the train. They were pretty much at the farthest point you can be on the railroad, away from a diesel locomotive to come and help pull them back. So they had to call a crew in Scranton. Of course, the crew had to report to Scranton, get on the diesels, inspect the diesels, get them fired up, leave Scranton, and then do the hour and a half or so run down here to the water gap. The whole process took almost 4 hours, I think, to get down here, to couple onto the back of the train and pull it back to Scranton. The locomotive, which is of course on the far end of the rolled rail here, the locomotive wound up sitting in the water gap for several days until a track behind it could be repaired and they could get it out of there. So they had a hostler come down. They kept it fired up, had a hostler come down, brought water down to it, and let it just sat there. That's going to wrap things up for tonight. The next show, I'm trying to get away from doing shows in the middle of magazine deadlines. It doesn't work out real well sometimes. Next show is going to be February 15th, which sounds really early, but it's actually the third Wednesday in February. By then, I will have been on a trolley charter and a big steam charter. So I should have some stuff ready to go on the 15th. And I hope to get out into the Pinelands around here and do some other exploring of neat things. So next show is February 15th. I'm going to sign off for the YouTubers now, and